And I pause it, legitimately run it because we may forget.
Then go ahead and pause it. Speaker today is Reverend Jackline Makena, who is a minister in the Methodist Church in Kenya and a theologian. She has a vast experience in research and writing on contemporary theological issues, especially on gender, eco-theology, ethics, and social justice. Her interests are Christian mentorship for young people and the marginalized in society. And her title today is The Ordination and Ministry of Women in the Methodist Church in Kenya. And with that, I turn it over to you, Jackie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. As you've rightly said, today we delve on the ordination and ministry of women in the Methodist Church in Kenya. This is a continuation of the lecture that we had with Professor Esther Mombo was dealing with women, Quaker women. And today we see now and hear the story of the Methodist Church in Kenya women. I'll begin this by delving into Wesleyan tradition and women because the Methodist Church in Kenya is a Wesleyan tradition church. And John Wesley was the founder of Methodism, and the Methodist Church in Kenya is part of it. And in this Wesleyan tradition, women have been involved in leadership since the time of John Wesley, but the acceptance of ordination for women took some time. And this now begs two questions that this presentation will be trying to tackle. The first one is, why were women involved in leadership since the inception of the Wesleyan tradition? What are some, because when we look at other traditions, theologically, women were not really engaged in these types of ministry, even though in the early church, as recorded in the scripture, we see the ministry of women, which was not really appreciated as the church grew. The other question is, why was there difficulties or a delay in the ordination of women? And this presentation today will particularly talk about the Methodist Church in Kenya, where I serve as a woman clergy. So John Wesley and women ordination. As I have said, Wesley is the founder of Methodism, and he held a complex and evolving view on the ordination of women. In his early years, he was opposed to the idea, believing that it was contrary to scripture and tradition. But however, as he learned more about the issue and met women who believed were called to preach and minister, he began to change his mind. And during this time of John Wesley, when he was forming Methodism, the early days of the Methodist tradition, women were serving, but then they were serving in lay ministry, and most of them were lay preachers. At this particular moment, they were not really accepted or ordained as ministers. But we see in John Wesley's view on women ordination kept on evolving as he continued to interact with women. And in 1775, Wesley wrote a letter to the Methodist in America, which he said that he had an open conviction on the issue of women ordination. In this letter, he argued that there was no clear biblical prohibition against it, and that the early church had ordained women to some roles. He also noted in this letter that many women had been preaching and ministering effective in Methodist societies. I would say from the research, this letter was the turnaround of the Methodist tradition, and especially in the West. And from this, they started thinking about ordination of women. John Wesley also went a step further to think deeply on priesthood of all believers, which is based from 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, where the scripture says, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light." This passage and others affirm that God calls all believers to serve as priests and that we are all part of the same body of Christ. And for those who know the Wesleyan tradition, this is one of the doctrines that we profess. The community of believers affirms and supports each other in this type of calling, the calling of a priesthood of all believers. And I go now to one of the quotes of John Wesley, which was in support with this, where he says, "Give me 100 preachers who fear nothing but sin and desire nothing but God, and I care not a straw whether they be clergy or lay. Such alone will shake the gates of hell and set up the kingdom of heaven upon earth." And in this quote following his other sermons, John Wesley clearly shows that anyone can be called by God. Anyone can serve in ministry, whether ordained ministry or not ordained ministry. And for him, he stressed about people who fear nothing but sin. And in this statement, we see that Wesley is not really considering the gender question, but then he's saying that all people are called, and regardless of the gender that God created them. So now, from the image that we see from the slides, we are the church. These are cross, and the people forming this cross come from all walks of life, different gender identities, gender orientation, different races, different classes, and all these people are people of God, children of God. And this is what the church comprises, according to John Wesley. And to continue, this Wesleyan thought about women in his 98th sermon, which he preached in 1786 on visiting the sick. Wesley uttered these words. He said that there is neither male nor female in Christ Jesus. It has long passed a maxim that women should be seen, not heard. Accordingly, many are brought up in such a manner as if they were only designed to be agreeable playthings. But is this doing honor to the sex, or is it a real kindness to them? No, it is the deepest unkindness. It is horrid cruelty, and I know not how any woman of sense and spirit can submit to it. Let all you women that have it in your power assert the right which the God of nature has given you. Yield not to the vile bondage any longer. You, as well as men, are rational creatures. You, like them, were made in the image of God. You are equally candidates for immortality. You too are called of God. We see in this particular sermon of John Wesley, he affirms that women were created also in the image and likeness of God, and also it stresses on the equal treatment of women. When you look at other church fathers or other early modern thinkers like Martin Luther, Calvin, Gregory of Nyssa, name all of them, their stance on women was very disturbing. But then we see John Wesley as a positive stance on women, and also supports and affirms that women were also created in the image and likeness of God. Now, from that backdrop, let us go to the Methodist Church in Kenya and hear the story of the church. The Methodist Church in Kenya was one of the first Christian denominations to arrive in Kenya. The church was planted in 1862 by the Wesleyan Methodist Church, which was a British missionary society. This Wesleyan Methodist Church was assigned a sphere of influence in the coastal region of Kenya. And this meant that the church was given the exclusive right to evangelize and establish churches in this region. When you follow the Kenyan history, when the missionaries came to Kenya, they were all assigned spheres of influence. For the Kenyans who are here, my name, of course, if you are a Meru, people know you are a Methodist, because that is one of the areas that the Methodist missionaries were also assigned as a result of spheres of influence. But then they started from the coastal region. And in 1895, these missionaries now decided to expand their work into the interior of Kenya. And they chose a mission in Meru, a particular place called Kaaga. And Kaaga is where I come from. I was ordained from Kaaga Synod in Meru, and this is where the missionaries first came when they wanted to evangelize the interior Kenya. And this region is inhabited by Meru people, and I am also one of them. And the establishment of the church there happened in 1896. Having said that, then what is the nature of ordination of women in MCK? The first stages of the Methodist Church in Kenya, like several other Christian faiths, were marked by a leadership structure that was very androcentric. This was mainly influenced by the argument from maybe scripture and tradition, where in Jesus choosing 12 male apostles, Christ established a pattern of ministry according to the interpretation of the scripture, which was to be a norm for the future of the church. Jesus Christ being male, or God incarnating in the male gender, and Christ also choosing 12 disciples which were male, that was interpreted to be a norm of the future of the church when it comes to ministry and church leadership. Another argument was Christ is the bridegroom and the church is the bride, and therefore the masculinity of Christ cannot be ignored. The Bible referring to Christ as the groom, therefore they felt that masculinity cannot be ignored, and that's why the leadership structure was disturbingly androcentric without really considering the female part of it. And most Christian traditions maintain this argument against the ordination of women. And women's positions in the church were often and are still constrained to auxiliary tasks, including responsibilities such as teaching Sunday school, leading the women fellowship, because of course it's a women fellowship, it cannot be led by men. Then hospitality in church, like for instance, the church that I serve in Nairobi, it is the duty of the women fellowship every Sunday to bring food or cook food for ministers and the guests of the church that day to take after the service. It is not the work of the men's fellowship, but it is exclusively the work of women fellowship. And in the same church that I minister, we find women are more when it comes to teaching Sunday school. Men are very few. By the time I was taking my leave, only left 3 men who are teaching Sunday school, but then the rest of the people were women, not because it is not announced, it is something that we put open for people to register the ministries that they want to participate. And the ministry of hospitality and teaching Sunday school is purely a women's thing. That is the thinking of the society that I serve. And also, women engage in other supplementary endeavors like cleaning the church and trying to make sure that the church compound is okay. So we see such, these are kind of the tasks that women in MCK engage mostly in. So now the existing cultural and social standards really influenced the absence of women from ordained ministry in Kenya during this era. As I've told you, I come from Meru community, and Meru community is a patriarchal community. Our community is governed by Council of Elders. They are Njuri Ncheke, and Njuri Ncheke is exclusively a council of men who govern the entire community. Just to bring it into perspective, in 2022, when Kenya held general election, the people of Meru voted for a woman governor. And this governor has been having serious challenges in not her work of serving the people of Meru, but challenges in the county assembly, where members of county assembly are 90% men, and they cannot really fathom to be led by a woman governor. So the first time they filed an impeachment, which did not succeed because the claims that they gave were not holding waters. And recently, I think a week ago, there was another impeachment of the same governor by the same people. But then the reason that they gave was not really a reason that can make a leader to be impeached. And this shows you how it is so uncomfortable in our community for women to lead men. And because of the patriarchal nature of the community. So we can say that patriarchal system in this community restricted women's opportunities to assume leadership roles, as we've seen not only in secular domains, but also in the church. The voices and agency of women were subject to limitations, and the involvement in the church was mostly shaped by gender norms and societal expectations that were present within the Kenyan context. And I say because during this time, the church was predominantly, the church was dominant in my community, that is the Meru community. So when it comes to the Methodist Church in Kenya, one of the requirements for ordination of clergy is one is supposed to have theological training, either a diploma in theology, a degree in theology, or maybe if you continue master's and PhD, that is okay. But the minimum requirement is at least a theological training. And for a long time, theological education remained a monopoly of a few men, despite women making up majority in congregation. And in some traditions, those who received theological education were admitted to ordination and mostly were men. I also am an alumnus of St. Paul's University, which was earlier known as St. Paul's United Theological College. And in St. Paul's University, uh, theological training then was married to ordination. One would not have been trained theology if they were not going to be ordained. And from history, most of the traditions which were in Kenya then were not ordaining women or were not comfortable with women leadership. And this shows that women were not really studying theology. And I'll tell a story of my mentor, Professor Esther Mombo, who really advocated tirelessly for divorce of theological education and ordination. And this advocacy led to separation of ordination from theological education. And at least a number of women now started pursuing theological education at St. Paul's University, though till to date, the number of women are fewer than men who are doing theology at St. Paul's University and other theological seminaries in Kenya. This shows you that even though this advocacy was there, it is an ongoing thing, an ongoing kind of advocacy to emancipate women and also to look at the culture. Why is it that women's leadership is not really accepted in our context, even if the theological education was separated from ordination. As earlier, we see that women served as lay preachers in Wesleyan movement. They still serve till to date as lay preachers, but then the number of ordained women are fewer. And this indicates that there was an early awareness of the women's contribution to the church. But then, despite this historical tradition of women serving in leadership capacities, a formal ordination of women, especially in MCK, faced a lot of criticisms for many years. And several key events and gradual transformations in the society's attitude were required to prepare the way for women to be ordained as ministers in the Methodist Church in Kenya. As this struggle of women ordination continued, the British Methodist Church intervened, and they sent a female clergy to Kenya as a missionary. This now was a visible depiction of a woman actively working in ministry, and this served to overcome the existing stereotypes and prejudices against women serving in the MCK. It took the British Church to bring a woman missionary, because even the first Methodist missionaries who came to Kenya were men. And therefore, when this problem really persisted and the culture was so strong that the women cannot lead, women cannot be ordained, a white female clergy was sent, and this kind of tried to change or to overcome the prejudices and stereotypes against leadership of women. Our presence was both an inspiration and a tangible example for a woman's ability to lead inside the church, then upsetting the entrenched gender stereotypes and the expectations. And due to that and several other advocacy that was there and women pushing for the ordination of the first woman minister in MCK took place in 1983. And this first woman minister was Cecilia Mwenda. And Cecilia Mwenda was trained theology from Kaga, but the second woman minister to be ordained is Joyce Mkii, who was the first Methodist woman to join St. Paul's United Theological College. And we can say now Joyce was the first woman who had theological training, but then Cecilia Mwenda also had informal training, was ordained in 1983. However, till to date, there is a disparity in women's leadership in the Methodist Church in Kenya. The current leadership structure of the Methodist Church in Kenya shows a significant gender imbalance. At the conference level, the church is led by the presiding bishop and assisted by the conference secretary, both of whom are men. That is the top leadership of our church. There are two men leading the church, the presiding bishop and his secretary, who is called the conference secretary. At the next level, we have synod bishops, who are ending the synods. Then now the other level, we have ministers heading the circuits and local churches. It is interesting to view the statistics of the number of women against the number of men. There have been in history 2 women bishops out of 15 bishops heading the synods in Kenya. And currently, actually 1 woman bishop retired. Currently, we have 1 woman bishop against 15 bishops who are men. And then we have 23 women ministers at these levels out of 144 ministers who are ministering currently in the Methodist Church in Kenya. This means that the women bishops constitute 15% of the total number of bishops. And this percentage now goes down because one of them has finished a term in 2021, while women ministers comprise only 16% of the ministers in the Methodist Church in Kenya. And we see that now there's a research that was conducted by one of the women ministers in Kenya, and this research, in this research, she did interviews to women clergy, asking them how they feel about it and what are some of the reasons that they think are hindering women leadership in the Methodist Church in Kenya. And from the data that was received and analyzed, we've seen that mistrust among women clergy and lack of social support have negatively impacted women leadership in MCK. Another thing that was mentioned was patriarchal attitude and male domination in the MCK also undermined women, particularly in electoral positions such as bishopric positions where numbers play a significant role. Maybe let me explain how bishops are elected in the Methodist Church in Kenya. At the synod level, delegates are elected. So there is usually annual synod every year where delegates are elected from that. And these delegates who are elected from the synod level represent the synod to the connection. And most often, people who are elected at the synod level are mostly men because, of course, due to patriarchal attitudes, they feel men are the heads and therefore men should represent the synod when it comes to the connectional meeting. And we find there are always a few women who are representatives when it comes to that. So these different synods, and currently there are 15 synods, delegates from all these synods comprise now the connection where election of bishops and presiding bishop happen. In such a place, there is usually politics. And as we are all thinking, a connection meeting which has 80% men and 20% women, and a woman wants really to and is gifted to be a bishop, the probability of this woman getting the votes to be a bishop becomes very low. And therefore, that is why we see women really in the Methodist Church cannot, or they ascending to this high level of leadership in our church becomes a great challenge. It took 33 years for Methodist Church in Kenya to elect and consecrate the first female bishop. The first woman to be ordained was in 1983, and the first female to be consecrated as bishop was in 2016. This shows how long it took for the church to really appreciate the gift of women and really appreciate that women can lead in the top leadership of the church. From the screen, we see that these two beautiful women bishops. The first one is Reverend Catherine Mutua, who led as the Bishop of Kaaga Synod between 2016 and 2021. I am a clergy today in the Methodist Church in Kenya because I was mentored by Catherine Mutua. She is the very first person who identified my gifts, and she held my hand to ascend as a young female who is called for ministry. She has not only done that for me, but also she has held so many other young women when it comes to mentorship in ministry in the Methodist Church in Kenya. It wasn't easy for Catherine Mutua to become the bishop. It was also faced with a lot of challenges, but then she withstood the challenges and became the very first female bishop of the Methodist Church in Kenya, and she did a brilliant job during her tenure. Then now, at least that the following year, another woman bishop was elected. That is the Reverend Alice Mutuma, who is still the bishop of Nyambene Synod, but then also she's finishing her term next year. That is in 2024. Since that time, since 2016 and 2017, there have been other elections of synod bishops, but women clergy don't really get to that top leadership. Maybe when it comes to elections, they are not elected. When it comes to shortlisting, some of them are not shortlisted to become bishops, or even they are not proposed to lead in this kind of top leadership of the Methodist Church in Kenya. It is a worry that maybe next year, after Reverend Alice has finished her term as a female bishop, unfortunately, if they will not elect another female bishop, then the Methodist Church in Kenya will go back to being an androcentric, male-dominated kind of leadership. Women, leadership, and culture. As we've seen from the onset, we have seen that the question regarding the ordination of women in Wesleyan tradition, particularly MCK, has been a cultural question. John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, did not have a problem with the ordination of women. He had, but then as he continued, that was solved, and he had an open conviction about the leadership of women. So in the Methodist Church in Kenya, we cannot say that the question of ordination is a doctrinal question, but rather it is a cultural question. It is a contextual question, the place that the ministry is happening. And this, some people will debate it's either biblical culture, as we have said earlier, or the Kenyan culture. And in particular now where the MCK is dominant. So our culture, especially the Meru culture, is patriarchal in nature, as I said earlier. And this plays a very significant role in the involvement of women in leadership. There's a real struggle for women to lead in our culture where our church is dominant, and also several other cultures in Kenya. And this research that was conducted by Dr. Mary Kinoti, who is one of the clergy of our church, it shows that due to cultural socialization on gender roles, women face multiple responsibilities. This now comes from them. They said this, and they said that they are expected to fulfill culturally ascribed roles as homemakers, caregivers, and nurturers. And this is, on the one hand, leads to chronic fatigue and stress, and especially when their spouses are unwilling to share responsibilities at home. And this now limits them to vigorously commit leadership. This is now one of the reasons why even some women do not want to commit leadership. It is a question of time because of the gender roles in our culture, where women are expected to be homemakers, women are expected to be at home taking care of children, taking care of the elderly. Women are expected to be tilling and doing all these kind of jobs. And they feel now, since their partners are not part of it, because it is viewed that the work of homemaking is a woman's work, they say this is so overwhelming in that they cannot even commit to leadership, which is another challenge. Even if they commit, they are faced with so many hurdles. On the other hand, both men and women do not trust women's leadership. This is due to socialization, as we will see as we continue. So we can say that women and men need to look at culture critically. We have seen that in the Methodist Church in Kenya, culture plays a very big role when it comes to women leadership and ordination. And this challenge of women ordination has nothing to do with the image, with women being created in the image and likeness of God. That is not the question in play here. And as Mercy Ambodoye says, that theology is not something we receive, but struggle with. It is not something that is given to us from on high. It is something that we have to work out for ourselves in our own context and our own time. And therefore, we are struggling, we are still, we are struggling with the issue of inclusion of women in our context. And the struggle still continues until the MCK values the ministry of women. So now from all that, we can comfortably say that patriarchy is one or is the main entrance when it comes to women participation and ordination and leadership in the Methodist Church in Kenya. And patriarchy, for me, is the root sin, the root cause of this sin of exclusion of women. And Dube argues that due to patriarchy, men are socialized to believe that they are biologically conditioned to lead, control, and decide for everyone, whereas women are socialized to be submissive and obedient. And I think this kind of socialization is what is going on till to date in our community. And according to Esther Momo, patriarchy is a system that promotes male privilege by being male dominated, male identified, and male centered. And we see that playing very well in the Methodist Church in Kenya. It involves the exclusion and oppression of women. Patriarchy oppresses not only women, but also men. And also on the other hand, some females also thrive through patriarchy as either belonging to a particular line of people. And often these females are against other women leading. So we see that patriarchy downplays both male and female. It is not only oppressing women, but also on the other side brings a lot of oppression to the society. And as Nyamura Njoroge says, we need to collectively pray patriarchy out. And we need to demolish this system called patriarchy to fully emancipate women. We also need a theological inquiry that calls for debunking this oppressive structure and an alternative where both male and female are treated equally and with dignity. To achieve this goal, and especially as the Methodist Church in Kenya, we need to recognize that patriarchy is a systemic oppression that can only be dealt with from its root cause, that is sin. And this assertion corroborates with Gerard West's observation that patriarchy is a pervasive structural sin. And as we all know, sin is the root cause of all evil. Therefore now, what are we supposed to do? What are the practical ways that we can demolish patriarchy? For me, I think we need to draw lessons from the life and ministry of Christ, which shows God's relational love. What do I mean by this? Jesus Christ's life and death is primarily a moral example to humanity. It inspires us to lift ourselves out of sin and grow towards union with God. And as Austin posits, Christ did not die in order to repay our sins, but instead to serve as an example of love and mercy, thus reminding us of what we need to do and how we must behave. The same person further asserts that at the cross, God's love is revealed, and the power of the cross rests solely on its ability to influence our opinion of God positively. The cross was necessary not only because its demonstration of God's love, the cross was necessary only because its demonstration of God's love influences all of us subjectively. Since the cross is the culmination of the work of Jesus on earth, his daily life and ministry on earth attest to his radical love. And in his ministry, Jesus always positioned himself between the oppressed and the oppressor. He loved and cared not only for those who were sick, poor, marginalized, or outcasts, but also for those who might be easily categorized belonging to the oppressors, such as tax collectors and centurions. We see that Christ in his ministry embodies the praxis of love. And therefore, in this case, and especially in my context, for us to emancipate women fully, for the Methodist Church in Kenya to value the dignity of women and to value the calling of women, we all of us need to combat this cancer called patriarchy. And how do we do that? We take an example of Jesus Christ by positioning ourselves between the oppressed, who are women, and the oppressor, which is the male-dominated system in the Methodist Church in Kenya. And by us doing that, by us sharing love, therefore we value each other when we see each other as created in the image and likeness of God. We see each other as worthy to be used by God. And we see that the love of Christ is not only limited to those who are victims, but also given to the perpetrators of oppression. Women alone are not able to emancipate themselves by themselves. It needs the entire community to sit down, the entire community to collectively see this sin, repent of this sin called patriarchy, and transform the community for all of us to serve equally. Christ's love is what leads to his suffering and death on the cross. And it is through this love that Christ transforms the world. And therefore, in our context, patriarchy serves as a system of oppression, which relegate women as the oppressed and empowering men to dominate. We present Christ as dwelling in the in-between space as an agent of God's relational love for the oppressed and the oppressor. And in so doing, the system that sanctions oppression is ruptured, and men and women relate now as God's redeemed children. This is a clarion call or a clarion invitation to all of us, and especially the traditions that subjugate women to emulate Christ and treat one another with love and dignity, honoring the gifts and talents of each other, honoring what God has installed in each other's life and heart for all of us to serve in this ministry and also to be transformative agents of our society. And in doing so, we participate daily in God's redemptive action of creating a safe space for men and women to be fully human. Because for the longest time, women have been viewed as not being fully human. They have stayed in the subordinate state for a very long time. And if we emulate the action of Jesus, then we create this safe space that we are talking about. The love of God that was revealed at the cross dismantles patriarchy. Gender hierarchy as the manifestation of patriarchy is a result of sin and not a command of God. This calls for an inclusive ministry. What do I mean by an inclusive ministry? An inclusive ministry is where both men and women have equal opportunities to serve in various roles within the church, including formal leadership positions and ordained ministry. All ministers, whether lay or ordained, should be open to both All ministries should be open to both men and women. There's nothing wrong with men participating in hospitality. There's nothing wrong with men teaching Sunday school. There's nothing wrong with men cleaning the church. Ministry is ministry. And there's also nothing wrong with women being presiding bishops and archbishops of our churches. We are all called by God, and these ministries should be open to everybody. And this is what I call inclusive ministry. The focus of ministry is an inclusive church. In an inclusive church is on service rather than establishment of hierarchy and authority. And I think for the longest time, our church has been our church has focused very much on establishing hierarchy and authority rather than serving the people of God. And now we say that for MCK to be an inclusive church, it should focus on ministry, on service to people, rather than the focus on who becomes what and how the who becomes what they are becoming. An inclusive ministry also recognizes that all church members are called to serve one another and the wider community, regardless of gender, regardless of age, ethnicity, or class. An inclusive ministry values and promotes diversity in its leadership and decision-making processes. And this includes both men and women, young and old, being part of this round table of discussion that makes decisions of our churches. Not only our local traditions, but also in the broader spectrum of ecumenism. An inclusive ministry recognizes the importance of having representation from different backgrounds, different perspectives, and experiences to ensure a more comprehensive understanding and application of the gospel ministry. It should not only be for those who are educated. It should not only be for those who have voices, for those who have power. This ministry should consider all voices, voices from the grassroots, voices from the people that the society do not value, because this is the ministry that God desires. And I think that is why God called the Methodist Church in Kenya. And an inclusive ministry, in an inclusive ministry, there is a commitment to challenging and demolishing or dismantling gender stereotypes and biases that may limit or marginalize individuals based on their gender identity. This is very important. It should be a ministry that names the evil, that names the things that hinder people from participating fully in the kingdom of God. And finally, this involves creating an environment where all members are encouraged to fully utilize their gifts and talents to serve the church and the community. And as a young minister of the Methodist Church in Kenya, I am looking forward to a church, the Methodist Church, where both men and women are equally valued, where it will no longer be a struggle for women to become leaders of our church. I'm looking forward to a church where there's no gender disparity, a church that women are not only 16% of the total number of ministers, but maybe equal participation of ministry. Because women are not fewer in the Methodist Church in Kenya because they are not called. They are fewer because women leadership is usually looked at with suspicion. And therefore, this is a call to everybody and all the traditions that are represented today. We need to have an inclusive ministry. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jackline. Anyone who wants to ask a question or to raise a comment, down at the bottom of your Zoom box there's a little button called reaction. If you push that button, it'll say raise hand, and if I see your hand, then I will ask you to unmute and ask your question. And we have a question right up, and it's from Mummy's iPhone. And please let us know who you are, Mummy, and ask the questions of Jackline. So go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, okay, that's Mommy's iPhone.
Are you there, Mummy's iPhone?
Yes, she's there on the end.
Oh, okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Is that, who is that, Carolyn, or who?
Can you unmute?
Can you unmute? Oh, there we go. Go ahead.
She's trying to unmute.
She's unmuted now.
She's not.
Was she not?
No.
Okay, well, I'll start with a question then, and then we can figure out the technology later.
Very good tweet.
Yeah. Jackline, here's your first question. Are you ready? Okay. Now you defended your position by a strong appeal to John Wesley. And that is a good place to argue, because both in the Methodist Church worldwide, women were involved with all kinds of ministry and preaching and various things. This is true in many countries. Now, when people argue against women in ministry, what authority do they point to? Is it just because they say, well, I'm suspicious, or do they say, no, that's not right? And if it's not right, what do they say? What are the kind of arguments that are offered to say, no, we should only have men in ministry?
Okay, thank you for that question. Yeah, as I said, Wesley had no reservation on women ordination or women leadership. As I have indicated in my presentation, especially from where I come from, culture plays a critical role. People generally do not believe in the leadership of women because they think that women are so emotional to lead. That is one of the reasons. Then they think, due to socialization in our culture, men are meant to lead, women are meant to follow. So as I said, in the Wesleyan tradition, and especially the Methodist Church in Kenya, it is not an issue of interpretation. It is not an issue of doctrine. It has everything to do with culture. And culture dictates that women are meant for home, are meant to be homekeepers, homemakers, but not leaders. And a few women who are in leadership are highly criticized, and people will go to an extent of even calling out their husbands as weaker men because their women are in top leadership and they are not. So it is how the culture is. It is an issue of socialization. And this is caused by patriarchy, which the presentation has named to be the greatest sin when it comes to entrance of women leadership. Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you so much, Jackie, for your presentation, for your paper. I have actually two questions. One is, what kind of cultures in regard to women's leadership or participation did you have before colonialism? And where were the place of women? in that situation? That is the first one. The second one, which will be a little bit more controversial, do you think, because as you mentioned, female members of the church are majority than the male. And do you think as we grow into the future and women become more educated, more become confident in who they are, would the male domination or male leadership become a barrier to the church's growth in the future mission of the church?
Thank you so much for your questions. I'll begin by answering the first question. What was the situation of women before colonialism? I will answer this by quoting Mercy Ambo-Duyoye again, where she says that it is too easy to lay blame solely at the feet of Westernization. We know that within the African religio-cultural heritage is to be found the seeds of the objectification and marginalization of women. Colonial policies simply helped the process along, and it succeeded to the extent that it was advantageous for African men. I think this answers the question. Patriarchy was still there in pre-colonial Africa. What Westernization did was just to add into that, but then the African culture was patriarchal in nature, and women still in the pre-colonial Africa were subjugated. Then the other question is, what is the future of the church if the church continues to be male-dominated and women are continuing to study theology? I think the future of the church is bright because we are still continuing to advocate for women's ordination, and we are still continuing to push borders of women participation in the church. When you look at me, I am a young clergy of the Methodist Church in Kenya, and this shows you that there is future of the ministry in the Methodist Church. We continue with the advocacy together with my fellow women, and we know that it did not start well, but the progression is well, and therefore the future of the church is there as long as we live and as long as the advocacy continues. I am a testament to that future. Thank you.
Okay, let us turn to Carolyn, and if you will unmute and ask your question.
Thank you so much, Jackie. It's awesome and it's good to see you. And thank you for that good presentation. I want to begin by saying that I come from a culture, and I come from Kenya in a Luo culture, which is very patriarchal, and I'm a priest in the Anglican Church. My question goes to something that you alluded to, that sometimes we find women stand on the way of their fellow women. I'm using my own words, but I know that you alluded to something of the sort. And I don't want to hold the idea that women are the enemies of themselves. But I know that if a woman stands on the way of another woman in leadership, it means that there are some patriarchal elements behind what is happening. From your point of view, do you have some ideas of how we can deconstruct this narrative, whereby when I want to become the bishop in Bondo Diocese, the first people who will ask whether we'll make it will be the women. I'm just giving an example. Do you have some ideas on how we can help our fellow women, because there are the many in the pews, to deconstruct the narrative that women are the enemies of themselves? Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you so much, Carol, for that. As we said, patriarchy is a system. And this system not only is propagated by men, but also it is some women are also in the system, and patriarchy is so shrewd. It has different ways of reappearing. So sometimes it will come from a male-dominated kind of thing. Some other times it will camouflage, and some women also will fall victims of this particular system. And therefore now, when we talk about patriarchy, we are not being against men, but then we are against this system that influences both men and women. And the system has made women believe that they are subordinate to men. And therefore, sometimes when you go to big gatherings and you are seated as a girl, women will tell you, girls don't sit, go and serve people tea. And the ones that are referred as people are men. Therefore, now you see this kind of socialization. And that's why I say that unless we deal with the system itself, even women will continue being hindrances to other women. But then this doesn't mean that some women are not really supportive of women. I am a mentee or a product of women's mentorship. I've been mentored by women in my entire life. So I can attest to women supporting women. But then also there are some women who are affected by patriarchy. And therefore we need to deconstruct this kind of system, this sin of patriarchy. And after us demolishing the sin of patriarchy, then both men and women will be free, and they will see each other as children of God, who are created in the image of God, who have equal opportunities in service, not because of their gender, but because of their ability. And I think that is what is lacking when it comes to the ministry and other leadership positions. So the problem is not those women, the problem is the sin that we call patriarchy. Thank you.
Azeli.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm Azel and Duimana. I'm from Burundi, and I'm a scholar here at OCMS. And I did a research on hindrances to women pursuit of formal theological education in Burundi, a master's degree. And I have one of the findings of my research is that women were perceived as a threat to men's position in the church. It's just a small aspect, really, in a patriarchal society. But I'm looking for a response toward the future of the church about a third space in which both men and women hold hands to serve, and they perceive the program as a church program, not really as men and the women relationship, or individuals and as couples and families. Because if the bedrock of the program is the culture, then the church have to foster transformation. So personally, my response to that, I see women staying behind because there are many in the churches, and they're not willing to address the issue. They're not even taking part of that challenging question to discuss about it. And I would like to hear from you as a minister, ordained minister, what you think should be the transformative response from the church. From the church, I mean both men and women together, holding hands to engage with the patriarchal cultural narrative, which affect actually both men and women, I think, in the church. That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your comment and question. I'll start by what you've said, that women are viewed as a threat to men when they get empowered. For me, I would say that is another face of patriarchy. Patriarchy has so many faces of coming, and this is one of the assertions of patriarchy. So I would say there is no threat. What women are doing is to bring the other wing of the bird. As Mercy Amboduye says, a one-winged bird cannot fly. So, but the ministry has, for the longest time, been dominated by men, and therefore empowerment of women or theological education of women is bringing the other wing of the bird, so that we can strike a balance when it comes to ministry. Then the other question that you've asked is about the future. What should be done when it comes to patriarchy and the future of the church? I would say both men and women should look at culture critically, as I said in my presentation. As we all know, theology is contextual, and we are all a product of culture. So how we look at culture is what really determines the results of what we will have. In one of the seminars I attended with Professor Esther Mombo, she said that she's purely a product of culture, the opportunities she has gotten and the opportunities that she has been denied in her life. It's all because of culture. And therefore, I would also say the same thing. Let us be critical on culture. Let us remove the negative elements of culture and uphold the positive element. Then we're able to inculturate the gospel with the positive elements of the culture. And when I talk about the culture, there's the biblical culture and there's the culture in which the Bible is interpreted. So both cultures are supposed to be looked into critically. And anything that is life-denying is not from God. God is a God who gives life, not only life, but life in abundance. So as we do this criticality of the culture, let us pick elements of this culture which are life-giving and life-affirming. Thank you.
Go ahead. Thank you very much, Jacqueline, for a very clear and positive presentation. And I just want to say that I doubt if OCMS has ever been honoured by the presence of so many Kenyans as we have here today. Carry please.
Come join us.
I want to reflect a bit on your theological reflection towards the end of what you were saying. I think you said that the crucifixion destroys patriarchy, or something similar to that. And when you talked about the nature of salvation, as it were, your own doctrine of atonement, it appears to be a non-violent atonement. That is to say, it is the love of Christ portrayed in his death that draws us towards God. That is the basis of the atonement, if I've understood you correctly there. I mean, I support this. I think, and I'm going to stick my neck out here in this evangelical centre and say, I think the doctrine of a penal substitution is a patriarchal doctrine because it presents, well, rightly or wrongly, I mean, this can be easily misunderstood. It presents a picture of God the Father who is punishing his son. Well, we know. I don't want to go into the details of that, but I think that particular understanding of atonement strengthens patriarchy. What you are presenting is another doctrine of atonement, a non-violent doctrine of atonement. I think it's J. Denny Weaver who's written about that. And I think you could strengthen it further if you included an understanding of the resurrection and what the resurrection does. What is the role of the resurrection in overcoming patriarchy? Is it because it is a symbol of the new creation, our new creation in Christ? I don't know. I'm just inviting you to explore that a little bit more further. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that reflection. I'll consider it.
I have a question in terms of the election of bishops. I'm supposing that you have regional conferences and national conferences, and that you have delegates that go to those. Are the majority of those delegates all men, or is there balance in gender in those? And are women working to elect women representatives to the meetings where elections take place? Because all these things are, at least in the Methodist Church and many churches, are relatively democratic processes. What's going on that level? Because I know you can effectively organize in Methodist churches to help elect the people that you see fit. It's not just from the top down, but it's from the bottom up to a certain degree within Methodist polity.
Okay, thank you for your question. What happens when it comes to representation at the conference level? There is usually synod meetings, annual synod meetings, where different synods will meet in different times of the year before the conference meeting, before the connectional meeting. In this synods meeting, that's where delegates are proposed. And these delegates are the ones who represent that particular synod at the connection level where election happens. It happens that either knowingly or unknowingly, most of the people or the delegates appointed at the synod level are men. Women are usually fewer. Why? The annual synod is comprised of leaders and ministers. Ministers most of them are men. Church leaders, most of them are men. This now informs also the selection of representatives of the synod to the connection. So when it goes to the connection, most definitely, majority of the delegates who elect bishops are men and a few women. So now that answers your question. It's about
in terms of the synod level, is there any point where congregations are able to nominate and move people to the synod level, or because I know, I'm a Presbyterian, so we have our system as well. But one of the ways that we have affected change is through congregations, to the presbyteries, to the synods, to the General Assembly. And those have been relatively effective, and it's not controlled by, we don't have bishops, but there has to be equal clergy and laity at those. So it's the laity that has helped to bring about great changes, as well as the clergy. But do you have any system of congregations being able to put their representatives up for representation at the synod?
So the polity of the Methodist Church, as you've rightly said, is democratic in nature. So it starts from the local churches.
Okay.
The local churches elect their church leaders. And somehow, somewhere, these church leaders elected are mostly men. These church leaders form the church council. Different church councils will form the circuit quarterly meeting. That is a meeting comprised of leaders from different local churches and lay preachers. So lay preachers, most of them are men, right? Church leaders, most of them are men. So those are the members of the quarterly meeting. These members of the quarterly meetings are the ones who form the annual synod. So it starts from the local church. The local church is so democratic in nature. They elect their leaders. But then due to this influence that I am talking about, somehow some men are elected more than women, and this continues. So it is usually a meeting of leaders. But then as we go high, they reduce the number of leaders. But from the ground is usually a meeting of leaders up to connection level. So the people who go to the connection level are leaders who are elected from the synod. The synod is comprised of leaders who are elected from the circuit. The circuit is comprised of leaders who are elected from the local church. Therefore, now we get, it's because of the quality of our church, there's no way that other people can join this kind of leadership.
Okay, one last question. Okay, I just want to follow up on that.
Yeah.
Now, if I know anything about most churches I attend, and I've attended around the world, most of the people sitting in the pews are women.
Yes.
All right, not men. All right, trying to get men to go to church is like pulling teeth. All right, so somewhere along the line, it seems that women are voting for men. All right, so is there, just to challenge you, rather than saying it's all these men are the problem, it may be convincing women to elect their own. So it seems like an education campaign and a church political campaign led by Jesus and the cross, that would encourage women to elect godly women to places of leadership in the local congregations, because I think you could start a grassroots movement that would move right up the ranks of the church, but you'd have to start at the local congregation. To just expect patriarchy to go away is unlikely unless the women themselves say enough of this. Women run things very well. Let's elect women to be our leaders.
Yeah. I agree with you. There's work still which has to be done, and that is what we are currently doing. Like the church that I minister, the chairperson of the church is a woman, and the secretary is a woman. That shows you that it is a continuous kind of advocacy that we are doing, and we are hopeful that at the end of it, there'll be light at the end of this tunnel, and women also will occupy formal leadership positions. So I would say it's a journey that we started, and it's a journey that will not give up, and we'll see to it women also are in these top leaderships. So yeah, it's something that we are working on. Thank you.
We'll turn to David Singh for our last question. David, if you will ask the last question, and we'll close off this excellent session that Jackline has done.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for this excellent presentation and your answers to questions. You had a fantastic role model in Esther Mombo, whom I know for many years now, having met her several years ago in Jos, Nigeria. I was just wondering about your own story, and part of that was obviously included, but I don't know what you chose to exclude in that story. Obviously, the purpose of this presentation was different. It was not about telling your own story, about how you were able to reach a position of authority and leadership in a context that is so apparently anti-women. and despite all the challenges you've described, how are you able to generate the kind of networks and mentorship roles around you to reach the level of leadership that you've been able to reach? And the other two women whose pictures you showed, who are now bishops, how was that possible in a context like the one you described?
Thank you so much. I'll start with my own story. As I said, I am a product of intentional mentorship from two women. The very first woman who identified my calling, that is the bishop, one of the two women that I've shown, Bishop Catherine Mutua. And me getting into ministry was during her tenure as the bishop. So she held my hand and she defended me at all levels, and I was able to go through the process of candidature in the Methodist Church in Kenya. You go through a series of interviews for you to be a clergy. So through a mentorship, she really held my hand to come up when it comes to that. Then now I have a very important and significant person in my growth, Professor Esther Mombo, who also identified me from the very first day I joined theological training at St. Paul's University. She worked with me, and through our intentional mentorship, exposure, and support, and giving me platforms, I was able to become the person that I am today. So I would say it is purely product of intentional mentorship, and also people providing platforms for young ministers like me to be exposed and also to participate. I think that is what really has made me the person that I am today. About these two ladies who became bishops, it was not easy. As I said earlier, also that was really, they became bishops through a very intense campaign by women for women. And it was so intentional, and people influenced each other that it is enough is enough. Now we really need a woman bishop. And they were not voted for because they are just women. They are voted for because they had the ability to lead as bishops. From their previous works in the circuit, from their previous positions, it was so clear that they had the ability to lead. I'll speak about Bishop Catherine Mutua. Before she became the bishop, she was the secretary of the bishop. And therefore, she used to do most of the work of the bishop, and the entire synod knew whatever is happening, it is Catherine who is the secretary of the bishop doing it. So they came out strongly. Kaga Synod came out strongly, and they said, we'd really love to be led by this great, brilliant woman who has been doing everything. And therefore, this is how she found her way to become the bishop. And her becoming the bishop opened the path of this other lady also to become the bishop. And I think that is our story, and the story still continues, because when it comes to mentorship, there's the Circle of Concerned African Women Theologians, where intentional mentorship is happening, and they are great upcoming young women theologians from Africa. And we are all, and also sons of the circle. They not only mentor women, but also mentor men, because we are saying it is not about women, it is about an inclusive society, a society that values each person's dignity. And I think that is what the circle is currently doing. And we are so proud to be sons and daughters of the circle. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna have Marina ask one more question. I just have a comment before she does, all right? One of the things that we can really use is professors in the seminary from Kenya who have PhDs from OCMS. And I'm looking at this whole congregation gathered on Zoom. I would like you all to pray in your heart and see if God is calling you to leadership. And if so, to think about applying to OCMS, because we would love to have some Kenyan women who are doing their research with us, because you have so much to contribute to the growth and development of church and mission globally. And with that, I will turn it over to Marina for a last question.
Yeah, Jacqueline, thank you so much. Actually, the question that I was going to ask was about circle of concerned women, but you have more or less answered it in your last comment. So all I would say is thank you so much. And also, yeah, thank you so much to all the members of the concerned circle of concerned women who are here today. Congratulations. I think this is all happening, and also Jackie has clearly mentioned it is through the mentoring that she received from the circle of concerned women that she is in a place where she is now. I do know that you have faced lots of challenges and problems along the way, but I think you all are very blessed. Thank you.
And this will be available via YouTube. If everybody who wasn't able to attend today, they can get online and watch this excellent presentation and also the questions and answers. So thank you again, Jackline.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll say bye-bye from Oxford, and blessings to all of you.
So many of them on the screen.
Yes, so go ahead, Jim.
Really well. It's a good network, isn't it?
Yeah.
Big chance to recruit.
I'm